podcast. I will actually start with the icebreaker,
Awesome.
if you don't mind.
Not at all.
I thought about the icebreaker while I was getting my haircut this morning.
Perfect.
It was a good time to think because you're sitting in a chair and you have nowhere else to go.
Hmm.
Based on what you can recall, what is the longest period of time you were without your cell phone or couldn't use your cell phone? And how did you fare emotionally through that time?
That's a great question. Um, the longest I've gone without, I guess without actually access to my phone was whenever I've gone to India on mission trips
Okay.
because I choose not to get cellular service. And so my phone is like a camera at that point. And usually where we were going was in the country. So it wasn't like we had access to, Wi-Fi or anything like that. And so, most of those 7 to 10 days, it was literally just a camera. And so that was it was actually pretty wonderful.
Did anyone else have cell service? Or I'm assuming it.
Uh, the team lead did, just because
Okay.
we needed to make sure that we weren't taken or anything. So just in case of emergencies, but
Right.
yeah, just the team lead had it. But also because it's on the other side of the world, anybody that you would talk to, when you're awake they're asleep, when you're asleep they're
True.
awake, so it's just very difficult with communication anyway. The main thing you would do would be social media, but
Right.
that just wasn't something I was worried about. So it was actually pretty great.
How long was it?
Yeah, the last trip I took was 10 days, start to
Okay.
finish. And that was, yeah, it was beautiful. It was
Okay.
beautiful.
So,
What about you? What about you? That's the longest you've ever gone.
oh wow, turning it back on me.
Yeah.
It would probably be foster camp.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I've talked about another episode. I actually interviewed the camp director. What that would be 6 days, almost seven
Yeah.
days.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's interesting because it correlates with your answer where it's very missions based, service based. So I actually did fine because I was just focused on the kids, focused on serving the entire week.
Hmm. Yeah. It's what else it's you realize that your technology would only serve as a distraction if you were to have it. And
Right.
so and then of course I always make solemn vows to myself of oh, after this I'm never going to be on my phone the way I was. And then somehow miraculously my screen time just continues to go higher and higher afterwards. And it's well, I was well intended, but that did not work out the way I thought it would.
Do you know what screen time you average right now?
Ooh, no, I haven't looked in a while, but
Okay.
I do have a lot of my apps shut down after specifically my social
Hmm.
media apps. I can only spend an hour on them, or else I have to put in a passcode, and it's just annoying. So
Okay.
it's limited because I have installed self-imposed limits on how much time I should be spending on my phone.
Right. I do that
Mm.
too. And I think Apple probably added that feature, realizing how many people wanted that, wanted to be able to have a dumb phone in a certain part of the day.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Um, okay. Well, I like that answer. Um, that was good. Yeah. I would say that after about a week, I did get antsy,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that my time of missions or service was coming to an end. So
Mm.
those cell phone withdrawals did hit me at a certain point.
Yeah, I think it's natural too, because I mean, they're it's funny now, technology companies don't hide the fact that they have designed these things for us to get addicted to. They've actually
Right.
designed it to cue our brains to release the serotonin. And it's everything is designed for us to keep engaging with it, because the more we engage with it, obviously it continues to perpetuate
Right.
capitalistic stuff and all that, whatever. But and yet we're still just but I can't live without it now.
Hmm.
15 years ago I wouldn't have felt that way, but now it's I have to have it. And now, especially becoming a parent, and
Mm.
now, having a spouse, I feel oh, now I have reasons to need it, right?
Right.
I have reasons why
It's
and I can
justified.
justify it. And right.
Sounds like you need to go
Exactly.
back to India for another couple days.
Oh, you don't have to tell me twice. I love that place. I would go back tomorrow if I could.
Nice.
I love it.
Well, tell us a little bit about who Angela is. I know you did send me your bio, but I'd
Hmm.
love to hear it in your own words.
Yeah. I am I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I'm a pastor, I'm a preacher. I am a advocate. Um, Currently for my job, I'm the executive director of a nonprofit organization here in Pasadena called Harambee Ministries. And I'm somebody who, although I have opportunities to stand on platforms and have a mic in my hand, like I'm just like regular. Like when I tell people
Hmm.
who I am, I'm like, no, I'm regular, like, buy my pants from Costco, like regular. Like I'm just another regular person who
That's
will
so
have
good.
like meats and clothing in the same carriage unapologetically. Because I think there's like this misnomer with like pastors and with leaders that,
Mm,
just because we're in these positions that I think Western culture has like elevated,
mm.
that maybe that there must be something like mystical or magical about us that has gotten us there. And I'm like, nope. I just finished organizing all the toddler books on our bookshelf because my children just threw them all over the floor today, right? Like it's just very, very regular over here, and just very clear on who I am. And I think that that's kind of, whenever I talk about who I am, I describe my life like a stew.
Okay.
I think a lot of people want to live a compartmentalized life where like one part of your life is over here, one part of your life is over here, and you
Hmm.
try to keep things like really neat and tidy. But for me, I found that way of living exhausting, because I was constantly context switching and mode switching and trying to become whoever it was that I felt like people were expecting me to be in those different spaces. And a friend of mine said, she was like, Angela, when you walk in the room, like as a leader, you're not like less of a mom or a wife than you
Mm.
were before you walk, before.
Right.
You're all of those things all the time. Like in a leadership space, sometimes they need to be mothered. In a pastoral space, sometimes they need a sister. Like all the pieces of me are who like God stitched me together to be all the time. And so I just live my life like a stew, instead of like a bento box.
You need to coin the term Costco regular. I think that's a hashtag or
Totally.
something.
Hmm. Oh yeah, for sure. I like the last like 3 or 4 sermons I've preached, I've like kind of tested the joke, and it like literally is a hit every time. And I found myself, I'm like, but it's the probably one of the most true things that I say about myself. It's like so it's like it's also fun that it's funny, but it also is just like, and it's just true. Like
Right.
it's 1,000,000% true. So anyway, that's me.
I'm curious from your bio, one thing that stood out to me were the names of your three children.
Mm-hmm.
You have a 13-year-old daughter named Lizzie, a 4-year-old Justice, and a 3-year-old Ayla, pronounced like
Mm-hmm.
Kayla, you clarified here.
Mm-hmm.
What are the stories behind their names?
Yeah. Lizzie is my bonus daughter. So my husband was previously married, and so I was not a part of her naming process.
Okay.
And so I won't speak about Lizzie, but with Justice, I had a name when I was 14 weeks pregnant. I didn't even know the gender of the baby yet. And me and the team that I was on at that point, we had been studying the book of Acts in the early church, in the
Hmm.
book of Acts. And we were learning, we had just finished reading the chapter about one of the characters in the Bible. His name is Justice, Justus. And to the best that I could figure out, that maybe that's why it was in me. But I had a dream one morning. Actually, I had fallen back asleep, and in the dream, the Lord spoke so clearly to me, and I can count on my hand how many times I feel like I've heard very clearly like the audible voice of the Lord. And I was like, Justice Lee. And I was like, okay. And I woke up, I picked up the phone and I called my husband and I said, I know the baby's name. And he was like, we don't even know the gender yet. And I was like, it doesn't matter. The baby's name is Justice, and that's it. And I said, we're not going to tell anybody. We're not going to tell anybody the baby's name until the baby is born. And he
Okay.
was like, okay. So, and we didn't tell anybody her name until she was born, and we introduced her, and we spell her name Justise. I just felt like the S makes it a bit more feminine. And so but yeah, my girl's name is Justice Eliana. Her middle name is Eliana, and it means the Lord remembered.
Hmm.
And for me and my story, which I won't get into that, maybe one day we could talk about that, but the Lord remembering me with my child and remembering justice specifically with me has been was just like a beautiful story about me and my girl. And then Ayla, I got pregnant with Ayla 8 months postpartum.
Okay.
So she was a little surprise. So we we were we had a list of names that we thought about with other children, but none of them seemed to feel like right. And so my husband and I downloaded this baby names app, and
Okay.
it works like Tinder, where like you sign up with your partner and then you swipe left or right on the names that you like. And when there's a match, the app goes, "You guys both like this name." So and so I wish I had some like deep theological explanation for how we came to naming Ayla, but that was it. But her name means oak tree. And so when we kind of thought about it, it was like the scripture came to us about like they will stand like oaks of righteousness. And so and then her middle name is Grace. And so I
Hmm.
wanted her to be strong but graceful. And that is my girl up and down for sure. So yeah, so those are the stories behind my baby's names.
Ayla was the
Yeah.
first match.
Ayla was the first one. Yeah. Well,
Okay.
she was like the first match, and it was unbelievable, really, to us that it was kind of crazy.
Do you know if the app uses an algorithm to figure out what kinds of names you like, just based on
You,
like syllables or
that's a great question. I don't remember. It was pretty like simple.
okay.
Um, and it literally would just like pop names up to us and you just swipe left or right. And so I don't remember if we like filled in a little quiz or something like that. No, I don't remember. So
Okay.
yeah, because
It wasn't
Ayla
like
was like, it wasn't that complicated.
I'm just picturing like what's your favorite letter?
Yeah,
What's your
right. Let's start there. Yeah, no, it was not. It was a, hey, what's your partner's name? What's their email address? Okay, we've linked you to that was it. It was just that simple. So yeah, it was funny. It was a
Nice.
good
I'm
time.
glad I asked that question. Did not expect such a good story.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
So let's start the
Mhm.
episode with the
Great.
question that I always ask. What is your I used to think statement, Angela?
Yeah. I used to think that leadership was lonely, and now I don't at all. I I've been in leadership in some way, shape, or form since I was like 12, like since I was like a kid for sure.
Okay.
And that was a big, I think most of it was like other people seeing leadership in me and seeing like possibility in me and
Hmm.
calling that out, and then also giving me opportunities to do it. I will say, as I matured and as I grew, part of that was great. And it also, at the same time, like kind of grew a little bit of an arrogance in me of like, oh, well, people think I'm a leader, like they think I'm special. Um, and so I think that arrogance coupled with, I had a few like rough friendship experiences where like, because I would be in leadership, especially like in the church
Hmm.
specifically, I was usually close with the pastoral staff or with the head pastor and their wives and all that kind of stuff. And so I had a couple experiences in my early leadership years where people basically were using me to get close to those like head leaders of the church.
Hmm.
And it just became really clear that that was the case. And so, so you have this young leader who's like developing this low key arrogance coupled with some friendships that really just went sour because of being used. And then like the icing on the cake of that was I would go to these leadership conferences, and they would always talk about like leadership being lonely and how you have to like learn how to trust in the Lord and like understand that, people don't know what it's like to be a leader, and they don't understand all that you carry, and they don't know all the burdens that you bear and things like that. And so I have this like growing root of arrogance. I have these spoiled friendships. And then I also have these like leadership gurus, teaching me that, I just got to do it on my own, right? That
Mm,
there's no way I can have, not that like it's just going to be difficult for me to have like authentic relationship. So I think all those things together led me to this place of just being a lonely leader, and I realized I would always feel it like on birthdays or
hmm,
in like holiday time, where I just realized like, man, like the people, I don't know who my people are. I don't know who are the folks that really know me and that
mm,
love me for me and not just because of how I perform
right.
or my talents or my networks or whatever. And I couldn't find them, and I hadn't found them in a long time. And then about when we were planning for the turning point for me was when we were planning for my wedding. My husband and I have been married now 6.5 years. And when we were planning our wedding, I was like thinking about my bridesmaids and all that. And I had a falling out with who was then my best friend. And after that, like the other people who were kind of in my circle, I was like, I don't know if I'm like, if you know me well enough to like stand up with me on the most important day of my life, like the
Right.
second most important day of my life or whatever, to that point. And so my sisters were my bridesmaids and they're my best friends. Like I love my sisters so much and both of them are so wonderful. So there wasn't anything wrong with that. But then there's like the bridal shower, and who do you invite to that? And I was new on a staff at a church. And so I invited a lot of the women who were on the staff, and we were still kind of getting to know each other. And so it was just a lot of kind of fumbling through. I would like to be your friend, but you don't really know me that well, but you're coming to this event. And it feels very like, thanks for coming to my bridal shower and bringing me a present that's very expensive, even though you don't know me that well. It was just a lot of that. And I felt it in my heart. And I just came to this point where I was like, I am about to be married. And wedding guests traditionally were called witnesses. And they're called
Hmm,
witnesses because they are supposed to be the people that on this day of your life, they bear witness to the vows that you make to your spouse. So that on your toughest day of your marriage, you should be able to go to your list of wedding guests and pick up the phone to any of them, and say, I need you to remind me of the vows that I took on that day that you bore witness to. And when I had that perspective, I realized like, man, these people, not all of them are that for me. And I need people like that. I need people that in the ugly days and the days that aren't shiny, the days that aren't on a platform or that are Instagrammable, like I need people who know me, who love me, and who are willing to like tell me the hard truth about whatever it is. And but at the same time, I need people who, on my days when I'm questioning myself, when I'm feeling insecure, when I'm not sure about where to go, who can also look me in the eye and remind me of the faithfulness of God in my life,
hmm,
and call that thing out in me too.
hmm.
Um, and so I just started committing to friendships like that. And it was slow going because making friends as a grown up is so weird.
That is
Like
very
it's the
true.
weird. It's just so weird. People don't tell you. And it's like such a crock because like you grow up and your parents put you in school and you're in school and you're in this like ready-made pot of supposed friendships, right? Like you're in this ready-made pot of people who are in the same phase of life, who are going through the same thing, who have the same leaders, like
Right.
everybody's having this similar experience, right? Obviously kids are different and there's bullies and all that, stuff, and social media, all that stuff now. Like being a child now is like terrifying, but then it was like that at that point it was like that was your reality. So you had this like Instapot of friendships, right? And then college is a little bit similar because you have a roommate, but sometimes they're weird, but sometimes they're great. And like, it's just, you're put in these situations where getting to be known and knowing people is way more accessible in the early phases of your life.
Right.
And then you become an adult. And then it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. All of a sudden, you're like relearning so many things, and you're already stumbling through the insecurities of young adulthood, mid adulthood, being
Mm.
single, dating, heartbreak, um, and all of these things that just come with a new job and corporate insecurities, or working for a nonprofit, not making money, but having people that do make, like, you just have all these things that are swirling, right? So then at that point, I was like 31 and was like well into my career, and I had lived the majority of my adult life believing that I was only as valuable as the skills that I possessed, that I was only as valuable as how I could make somebody else's life better.
Mm.
Not, I did not believe that I was intrinsically valuable. I did not believe that, like, on my own merit, simply as Angela, that I was like worth deep friendship.
I'm going to
And
interrupt quickly. I kind
yeah,
of want to latch onto that idea because
yeah.
you mentioned almost being thrust into leadership roles at a young age. And
Mm-hmm.
so, was there a core, or I guess, did feeling like a leader parallel being thrust into leadership positions, or do you feel like you were thrust into leadership positions first and then later on started feeling like a leader?
I was definitely, that's a really good question. My first gut instinct is that I was put into leadership positions. And then I think I learned by watching what a
Mm.
leader should be. Um, and then recognizing in myself, like, oh, I can do that, or oh yes, I can mimic that, or I can like emulate that value
Mm.
that you say is important for a leader. Like I can do those things, or I can be valuable to a team, and I can, I actually do have a strong personality. I remember my youth pastor said to me, like, Angela, you talk a lot. And I was like, yes, I know. And so, because that was like all of my report cards growing up, I would get like straight A's and be like, but she talks a lot. It's like, um, and then she was the first one that said to me, like, so let's like use that. How do we utilize that and take this thing that's in you so
Mm.
that you can then lead your peers? Um, and so it was kind of an amalgamation of both. It was both of people seeing something in me that I did not see in myself.
Mm.
And then as I got older, I learned how to see those things in myself. But like I said, it grew an arrogance in me that was just not necessarily too attractive.
Right.
So
What was
yeah,
one of
so I think
the
it was both. Mhm.
what was one of the first leadership positions you were in? Was it student council or something like that?
Uh, yeah, it was that. But one of the first ones that I was in, like, that I can remember for sure owning something, was I was like the assistant, like, worship director of the kids ministry. Like
Okay.
I like had to show up on something. I was like maybe 12 or 13, and I was like the leader of like this part of worship and for the kids, and had to learn
Right.
all the hand motions, and I would teach the kids the hand motions, and then I would lead it on Sundays and led it at Vacation Bible School, and like that was like a big part of my responsibilities. And then in school, it was like the typical, I always was the leader and the presenter for projects, or I was
Okay.
always, I was that kind of leader in my classroom setting. So yeah, those are some of the earliest memories of leadership that I have.
When you mentioned the arrogance, I guess, kind of growing in you over time because of all these opportunities being in the spotlight, what is an example that comes to mind?
Oh yes.
Fun stuff.
The story that I think like really encapsulates this the best is I was probably like 24, and I had been attending a church for probably like 6 or 7 months. And the pastor called me one night and was like, hey, and I was, for my day job, I was working at the YMCA. I was a program director. So I worked
Okay.
with kids and running programs. And so he called me and he was like, hey, I need you to take over the middle school ministry. And I was like, what? So I was like 24, I was figuring out how to lead myself, but
Mm.
he was like, you're going to be great. I just see this in you. I think you could do it. And I was like, okay. And so that ministry had like 200 kids in it, had like 40 volunteers already. Like it was a very well established ministry.
Wow.
And most of the leaders were all older than me and had been there for a very long time. And so I went into the first team meeting, had my little clipboard, and was like, I'm the leader now, and these are the ways that we're going to do things. And here's some things that I'm going to change. And like, these are the things that I need you all to do and to commit to, and blah, 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 blah. Like, I mean, I went in like hard, fast, heavy handed. Like it literally is like the most cringy. Like I look back at that, I'm like, oh my God, help me. It's like just so insecure.
Mm.
And just like faking it. And um yeah, so but that arrogance in me made me think like, oh, this is the right way to do this. I'm definitely going to win over this team if I lead them like this. And I was just so convinced that I was right. And it really took one of my best friends, like she served in the ministry at that time, and she was just like, you kind of came in a little hot and heavy there. And I was like, what are you talking about? Just like, what? No, that's what leaders do.
Right.
Gotta like
Right.
establish authority. And she was like, that is not how the previous leader was at all. And I'm not
Mm.
saying that you need to be them, but like this team is used to a certain way, and you're just coming in and hitting a hard pivot for them. And that just didn't go over well. And half the team quit after the first week.
Oh, wow.
So it was
Okay, I was
quite a
going to
humble.
ask what the
It's
response was.
mm-hmm, it was quite a humbling experience. And so
Mm.
that was one of the first moments where I had to kind of like look myself in the mirror and be like, oh, well, that just didn't work. That was like a huge failure, actually.
Mm.
And now who can I become? I can't make up for this failure. Like I did that and that happened, and I had to go and I apologized to those people. Some of them came
Mm.
back, most of them didn't. Um, which I don't blame them at all. And I had to like start looking at myself in the mirror and be like, okay, what kind of leader do I want to become? And so yeah, that kind of was the starting of that journey for me.
At that point, when you started asking yourself that question, what maybe resources or role models come to mind that began to um, form the leadership that you have now?
Mm-hmm. The church that I was at deeply valued leadership development. And so the
Okay.
pastor was, an organizational leadership guru, and had built this thing called like Leadership University or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was called. Leadership College, that's what they called it. Leadership College. And so you had to be like invited into this thing. And when you were in it, it was literally like 12 weeks of intensive leadership principles, theological applications, and that kind of stuff. And so that really shaped my theological view of leadership.
Mm.
It refined my calling, because I also believed that as a leader, I needed to be all things to all people. But
Mm.
going through leadership college helped me understand like what is mine to hold, what are my strengths, what are the things that only I can do, and then how do I then resource other people on my team to be the rest of the things, because a ministry needs to be whole, right? It needs all these things. Any team needs to be whole, it needs to be well-rounded, and the leader cannot do all of those things. So I think that part of my young adulthood, I would say that's like 25, 26, 27, those were really pivotal years for me, of
Mm.
just having like mentors who were like helping me refine my leadership style. Still stumbled along the way, but I think I learned very quickly, like, this is what I'm good at. I'm not great at this. So I need to find people to bring onto my team who can help hold those other things so that things can succeed and move forward well.
Right. So classic interview question,
Yeah.
job interview question, but what were your strengths and what were your weaknesses?
Strengths. My like strength finders is my strength finders is positivity, woo, connectedness, communication, and competition.
Hmm.
So those are like my, according to my, any test that I've ever taken, those are my strengths. When I think about other strengths, I think about the fact that I am what people would call a builder.
Okay.
And so leadership wise, I am really good at taking things that are maybe ambiguous looking in the beginning. I can create a very clear vision for what it should be, and then I can pave the road and build the things necessary to get to that vision.
Hmm.
I am also an incredible, gosh, that is so arrogant. I'm really good at like encouraging people to like step into their fullness. I
Hmm.
believe in health and wholeness and wellness and us being whole beings. And so I'm also, and I don't know how much you talk about this on the podcast, but I'm an Enneagram 1.
Okay.
And so with the Enneagram and as an Enneagram 1, one of the things that is a strength of Enneagram 1s, people who have the type 1 personality, I can analyze things very quickly, figure out where the gaps are, and then create solutions very quickly for how things can move forward and be better.
Hmm.
Now, the shadow side of that is that I'm very critical. And
Okay.
so part of me learning on my leadership journey is how do I offer suggestions in a way that is empowering instead of critical
Hmm.
and like dogging people out and making them feel bad about
Tough.
themselves all the
Right.
time.
That's tough.
So those are some of my strengths. I also like, yeah, I just really, one of the things I say to people all the time is I care way more about you than I do the work that you do. Because it's true. We are whole people and we are also limited beings. And so I instituted a 4-day work week every other week with my staff when I took
Hmm.
this job, because one of the parts of the culture that needed refining pretty quickly was just an unhealthy like grind culture of just like work, work, work. And as a nonprofit, it's really easy to do that because the work that you're doing is worthy, right? The work
Right.
that you're doing is important and it's about the community and it's about helping people like improve their lives, right? So it's good, holy, righteous work.
Hmm.
And yet, even in that, we can still have an unhealthy relationship with work.
Right.
And God has been so clear in the word of God that like, so I ascribe to the Christian faith. And so part of my faith is understanding that God has designed us to work 6 days and have a Sabbath, right? And a Sabbath is a protected time where
Hmm.
you are able to remember one, that you are a limited human, you are a
Hmm.
limited entity, and then two, figure out how it is that you reconnect to your source. And how is it that you give your body and give your mind the rest that it needs? Because what I say to my staff is like, I want you to be able to do this job for as long as you want to do this job. But that won't happen if you are caught up in hustle culture, if you're caught up in grind culture, if you're caught up in this westernized view of work, that says you have to grind yourself into the ground in order to be valuable. Um, that's just not true. And so that's like a big part of, I think part of one of my strengths is being able to help reorient my teams to recognizing that value. And what I have seen is they get more work done and they're actually more productive
Hmm.
because they are better rested. So
Right.
that's good. Yeah.
I want to actually at some point in this conversation get into nonprofits because
Yeah.
my wife is currently a grant writer
Awesome.
and she has worked with nonprofits in the past, and just
Mm-hmm.
observing her interactions and overhearing her Zoom calls,
Mm-hmm.
um, I feel like I've learned quite a bit about how the nonprofit world works. Um, but I want to actually, before we get to that, about your specifically about your statement. You said you used to think leadership was lonely. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, what what do you mean by lonely? What did you feel?
Mm-hmm.
What were some of those experiences?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, maybe we'll start there.
Yeah. So I mentioned about my wedding. I mentioned about like the relationships that kind of went sideways before. Um,
Hmm.
the loneliness was manifested in times where I felt like I needed somebody who knew me and would like look across my life and realize I was living like a bento box, right? This person knew everything about me as this piece of my life, or this person knew everything about me in this area of my life. Um, but there were no people who knew all of the things that I was going through.
Right.
There was no people who knew the depth of, like, I'm a very deep feeler. And so I didn't have people who I felt like could hold the depth of feelings. And that was what I believed. I believed that people couldn't or didn't have the capacity to or wouldn't want to.
Right.
And that was something that I had convinced myself of in my mind. It was not true. And so so then I just started very intentionally and very strategically trusting the Holy Spirit to like give me discernment of like who can I trust my heart with. Obviously separate from my spouse, but like who are some women that I can like trust my heart with. And so slowly one of my best friends now, her husband was on my team at that point, and he was like the kind of guy who's like, oh, you got to come over for dinner and meet my wife, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, sure. And he was like, okay, how's Tuesday? And I was like, oh, you mean that? I was like, great, I'm
Yeah.
going to your house
Yeah.
on Tuesday. So me and his wife sat there at the table, and we're like talking and talking and talking. I mean, we had been talking for like 3 hours, and at
Wow.
the end of the conversation I was like, we're friends. And
Hmm.
she was like, we're friends. and and literally
Wink, wink.
it was like this it was like a DTR, like right there in that moment. And like from that moment, she has been one of my best and closest friends. She's
Wow.
the godmother to my children, and she's just, yeah, she is my sister for sure. And
Hmm.
so after that experience of, we talked, we made a decision to now be friends. And now I'm making a decision to like trust you with these very messy parts of my life. And she proved herself over and over again, like, is so trustworthy. And so there's just so much trust built between us. So she was kind of like the beta test. So then from there, I started a life group with me and my husband. And I said to the people in the life group, I was like, I'm not sharing, because I was a pastor on staff at the church where we were leading a life group. And I said to them, I was like, I just need you guys to know, don't expect me to share much, at least for the first like 7 to 8 months. And they were like, eh.
That's so
And I said,
specific.
it was so, because I am so weirdly specific. And I said to them, I was like, look, I've just had some like hard experiences with people in my life who come into community with me and like have this expectation that because I'm a pastor, that they're either going to have like full access to me as a pastor, or they're going to have
Okay.
access to the leadership of the church. And I said, and so I just want to do life together and get to know each other, and
Right.
then I can and then I'll just like start slowly opening up and peeling back the layers. And from that moment on, not to say that there haven't been bumps in the road, but now those folks are the closest people to me. And their moms in that group, who we were all pregnant during 2020, like we all gave birth to our children in 2020. And so it was like, just like in the trenches, in the crucible of life together. And so, you get really close with people when you experience a global pandemic with them, and, you're all on Zoom and nobody knows what's going on.
Mm.
And then another opportunity was like another group of women who are leaders. And it was funny because we were all at a birthday party for one of the women, and we were all like, why haven't we like been friends? Why aren't we close to each other? Like, we've been in each other's orbit for like 5 years. And all of us in some way, shape, or form shared what I shared of like,
Mm.
it's just really hard being vulnerable with people when you're in that leadership position, because they just already have you on this pedestal. They already expect you to be perfect. They expect you to
Right.
have all this, and there's no space for us to just like fall apart. And
Right.
so at that birthday party, we all like committed to being a safe space for each other to be able to fall apart. And it was beautiful. And And that group of women has been another safe space for me.
Mm.
The key, like from me going from that lonely place to now a fulfilled place with my friendships, was decision. Like I made a decision
Right.
that my I wasn't going to believe the lie that like I'm unlovable. I wasn't going to believe the lie that I'm too much. I wasn't going to believe the lie that people always want something from me.
Hmm.
Because it's just not true. And thank God, like these friendships and relationships have proven that for me. Now, am I out here making friends with anybody who wants to be my friend? No. There, I just, I joke with my husband all the time, like, because people are so sweet and they're so kind and so loving. And they'll be like, they'll hear me preach and they'll be like, I feel like we should be friends. And I'm like, do you?
That's
And some of
brutally
them,
honest.
yeah, and some of them have turned into like sweet like acquaintances.
Okay.
But when I think about friendship for specifically in leadership, um there is a mantle, there's a weight that leaders carry and wear
Mm.
that not everybody will understand. And that is just the truth. That is not a statement of arrogance or a statement of like high and mighty.
Right.
And I'll speak specifically like in the ministry context and in the nonprofit context. When you are working a role that is so mission driven, um, there is a reality that your being and your worth and your work become pretty entangled. And you have to have spaces with people who can help you detangle that, who can
Mm.
help you say, like, you are not your work. You are worthy, separate and apart from the success of your organization. You are worthy and you are loved, separate and apart from how your team is acting, right? Like your value is not exclusively about the work of your hand.
Mm.
And I think that um, kind of friendship is something that every leader needs. You must have somebody in your life who can look you in the eyeballs and say, like, I love you and I care about you and I just want to hit you just because of you. That's it. Like, let's go grab a soda.
Right.
So,
To your point
yeah.
earlier about adult friendships, I think this is a theme that, yeah, I'm really glad we kind of got on this theme because, so I'm 24 right now, and I can
Mm-hmm.
relate to a lot of things that you're talking about when you were in your early 20s.
Yeah.
But there is this, at least for me, and I'm sure for you and many others, this realization that you use the word decision, and I'll add intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it feels, even that story you told about your essentially friend DTR, right? To sit down
Mm-hmm.
and say like we should be friends, or I think we'd make good friends. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the type of intentionality I found that it takes to make adult friendships. And it did catch me off guard.
Mm-hmm.
Um the idea of having common space, I think, is really rare, to be able to have a place where people gather. And within secular, I guess, non-Christian culture, there aren't many. I think that's something
Mm-hmm.
that there's a term that maybe in academia that they've coined for just the idea of like shared space. But for
Mm-hmm.
Christians, it's church.
Right.
Outside of religious spaces, it actually gets pretty tough. It's maybe
Totally.
bars or
Meet up like the softball teams or whatever,
right,
like in the parks, but it's not again, but that allows you to stay like so surface, right? Like it
right.
allows you to still say so unknown. Sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't mean to interrupt you. Keep going.
No, that's good. Yeah, and I think it is specifically hard for men and guys to get past the surface. And I know
Mm-hmm.
because in college, I had close guy friendships, and it's because there was time involved. When you spend
Mm-hmm.
3, 4 straight years together in college, eventually, with guys, I think it takes a lot of time to eventually have a conversation where it feels more than just sports or more than just the news or politics.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing you brought up that I could really relate to is the idea. I think you said you're a deep feeler.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that my wife observed when we first started dating was she goes, "Wow, you're really affected emotionally by movies."
Hmm.
Like I would watch a movie and I would just be like, "Man, what is life? Like where are we going? Who are we? What's happening?" And
Right.
I don't have you seen the Disney Plus series Loki?
Yes. I haven't watched
Okay.
the new season. Don't tell me anything about
Okay,
season
I
two,
won't say
but
anything about
season one for
the
sure.
second one.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm not a big Disney fan, nor am I much of a TV movie watcher. But that first
Hmm.
season of Loki really, I don't know, something about it, very
Hmm.
existential. I also
Totally.
appreciate I also appreciate the themes of like time and space. But after the second season, and I won't spoil anything, but after the second season, I remember we were just sitting on the couch and my wife is like, "Oh wow, that was a great series." And I'm just sitting there thinking like, I need to rethink everything in my life.
Right.
And
Totally. I
and
get that.
the at least for me, the feeling of like I want to talk to someone about this. Who can I
Hmm.
call to just
Hmm.
even just say like I just watched Loki and I feel like I need some more like rhythms in my life or whatever it might be.
Hmm.
And so the deep feeler, whatever you want to call it, characteristic, I could really relate to.
Hmm. Yeah, I think, I really think this, and again, this is something I've processed in therapy, is like being a deep feeler, knowing that I'm a deep feeler, having that. I had been socialized to believe, again, and I think I mentioned this earlier, like that I was just too much, and like it's like, oh, stop
Hmm.
crying, or like, oh, like calm that down, or like, please, like that's a lot of feelings. Um, and when you hear that enough, you begin to think like, maybe there's something wrong with me.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I heard this sermon one time of a pastor who so beautifully articulated that for those of us who do have a broad capacity for emotions,
Hmm.
like realizing that emotions were given to us by God. That emotions were given, we're like literally built with these emotions, and they're not something to be scared of. They're not something to avoid. These emotions are actually there to draw our attention to something, to
Hmm.
teach us something. And so for
Draw
me,
our
what I
attention.
realized was that, yeah, like I feel these things so deeply, and I also have a pastoral calling on my life. Why did God create me with all these big feelings and this pastoral calling? Maybe
Hmm.
it's because I am built to care for the flock. I'm built to shepherd and love and see and know people and be able to step into their experiences even with them not being my own. um and when I saw that, then when I saw those big feelings as meaningful, as full of purpose, it changed everything for me. And then I was able, I think it gave me a language to be able to articulate when I was having big feelings, to be able to say, like, this, I'm overwhelmed in this moment, but I just need to take some time. I need to process and I need to like give myself some grace
Hmm.
to not rush past whatever it is that I'm experiencing.
Sure.
Um, because there's something there in the middle of those big feelings that I'm meant to experience. And now, thankfully, I have folks who have like looked me in the eye and been like, "You're not too much. I can sit in this with you. I'm holding all this with you, and I want to be in it with you. Please tell me when you're feeling this way."
Hmm.
And that permission to just be fully myself, it was really freeing. And it's also helped me now as a mom, because I have three deeply sensitive children who have very big feelings. And so, which
Wonder where they
I
got that
can,
from.
and so I can appreciate their experiences, specifically with my littles, even at 3 and 4. I
Hmm.
can appreciate, like, man, the world must be so overwhelming for someone your size, like
Mm. Wow.
and also, you're your little brain is trying to process, because they've only had maybe a year of like conscious experience. My 4-year-old, maybe 2 years of like conscious experience in the world, right? That's like crazy. That's so overwhelming. And the world is like big and it's loud. And and other kids are loud and they have runny
Yep.
noses and your sibling is, fighting with you. It's just like a lot. Um, and I've committed as a mom to like letting them know that I'm not scared of those emotions. Like
Mm,
that it doesn't change how I feel about them. It'll never push me away from them. Because my hope is that me being able to sow those little seeds now will help them grow up never believing the lie that leadership or any
mm.
type of relationships have to be a lonely place.
Continuing with that idea, I'm curious. So, because you mentioned that to a certain degree, leadership is still isolating just because not everyone understands maybe the
Mm-hmm.
ambition, the vision, the drive.
Yep.
So, what does it look like to balance the leadership basically naturally being isolating in some ways, and then
Mm-hmm.
also avoiding that state that you were in before, where
Mm-hmm.
it was avoidable to be that lonely?
Yeah. I have found people who are completely unrelated to the work that I do.
Okay.
So, yeah. So when like with my team, for example, I can't fully be myself with my team or share all of the emotional turmoil of my role because then that creates insecurity and instability for them, right?
Right.
um but if I have friends who are also leaders in their own right and are completely unrelated to my field, to my arena, then it gives me this permission to just, they have no skin in the game, so they can
Mm,
listen, they can hold, they can counsel, they can whatever without any skin in the game.
mm,
And so they're just a leader in their own right, in their own arena, doing their own thing.
right.
um so that's been really helpful, is just having people who are removed from this world that I live in.
Right. So getting into nonprofits, how did you start
Mm-hmm.
at Harambee?
Yeah, it's a great question. Ooh, uh, I was a pastor on staff at a church for about 6.5 years. And during that time, our church became really involved here at Harambee, just as a church partner. And I was kind of helping. We were planting a campus down the street from Harambee. So we wanted to be involved at a local ministry to get to know the community before we planted the church. So just started volunteering here, started learning the history of this place. It was started by a prolific civil rights leader, Dr. John Perkins. And so
Mm,
um, just learning the depth of history of this place was amazing all by itself. And I just fell in love with it. Fell in love with the mission and the vision, and, just kind of served where I could from afar. And then in the fall of 2021, um, again, when I told you there's only a few times in my life that I've heard the audible voice of the Lord, God spoke very clearly to me that it was time for me to transition, and just come and serve here. And I didn't know what that meant, I didn't know the needs of this ministry at that time. And the long story short is that it became really clear to a few key people that, like, oh, like, you need to be the executive director. And I was like, all right, here we go. And because I sit at this place where I am both pastoral and administrative as well.
hmm.
And so I took on this role in January of 2022, and have been just really thankful for the opportunity to lead such an incredible organization and helping really guide it forward, and rebuilding what it's becoming now, 41 years into its existence.
Do you feel like you're at the peak essentially of like your leadership at Harambe? Is there something about the organization that kind of brings the best out of you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because this organization is all about nurturing and equipping local leadership to be the ones to solve the problems of the local neighborhood. It's very justice oriented. It's
Mm,
very much about looking at the gaps in community and figuring out how can we step in and answer the questions that the community is asking. How can we be a good partner when the community is in crisis? How can we serve in a way that is dignified? How can we serve in
mm,
a way that is a response to what the community is asking, instead of like saying, this is what we do, here are our services, here you go, and so the way that I think it brings out the best in my leadership is it's so deeply relational. Like the
Mm,
people, to the donors, to my
right.
team, I am talking to people and with people all day, every day. There's also a strategic piece of it that really like brings me to life, where I am building. The organization has been through a few different transitions over the last few years. And so I'm attempting to build structures to bring stability and sustainability to this organization.
Mm.
Um, and that plays to my strengths. And so, so I think there's a lot of ways that it does play to my strengths. Do I think I'm at the peak? I don't know if I'll ever peak as a leader. I hope I never peak as a leader. I hope I just keep kind of going on rolling hills and just keep getting better.
I guess I don't even know like the details the day in the day out of how the
Mm-hmm.
organization is run and what you do, but
Yeah.
just wanted to give you props, I guess, and then as well as just my respect for running a nonprofit to continue what I was saying with, observations through my wife's work. Um, I get the impression that it's like 20% of people do 80% of the work.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know whether that's true or not, but she's definitely been on calls where it's been a little chaotic, a little disorganized. And you know, even volunteering with Royal Family Kids who
Mm-hmm.
host the foster youth camp every year. I see that there's so much that goes into running a nonprofit that even is business related, like just
Mm-hmm.
having that business savvy on top of being relational and having the heart and having the passion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess my question from this is, what is it about nonprofit leadership that you think is different from maybe corporate leadership or any other kind of leadership, based on your experience?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that I would say is the main difference is you have to, as a nonprofit leader, strike the balance of being missionally driven and competent.
Mm.
Because one, you're not going to be getting paid the big bucks, just saying we ain't doing this because we're here to get rich. That's not it. um and I think if you don't have a clarified why when you're doing nonprofit work,
Mm.
you will not last, because on the days when it's hard, on the days where you have failures, on the days where you lose funding, on the days
Mm.
when you get funding, on the days where your volunteers don't show up, on the days where your staff is driving you crazy, like those things, those roads run out. But if you have a clarified sense of purpose and meaning in the work that you're doing,
Mm.
and a sense of like personal mission alignment with what the organization is chasing after, then you'll never really run out of road. You'll always have just another infusion of gas in your tank,
Mm.
to say like, but it's worth it. But like the loss of sleep when I have a grant due at midnight, like it's worth it. Like the spending time on the phone with donors who maybe whatever, it's worth it. The spending time with our people who are hurting or maybe who need support, like it's worth it,
Mm.
because this work, the work of this organization, makes me feel alive. It
Mm.
makes me feel like I am contributing in a meaningful way to my community, which for me is a value. I think that some folks in corporate settings, like the motivation is clear. It's money, right? And that's fine. It's money, it's ambition. That's great. Um, it is not every day that you'll find a corporate world that also like missionally aligns with your own personal sense of values and
Right.
whatever. Those jobs are out there, they're just rare.
Mm.
And so I think that that is the decision that nonprofit leaders have had to make, is that I'm willing to sacrifice salary, my weekends,
Mm.
evenings, whatever, for the sake of this bigger thing that I feel like is making a meaningful dent in this crazy, wild world that we live in.
Right. I'm curious specifically to Harambe's mission.
Mm-hmm.
What do underserved and marginalized youth in Pasadena need the most?
Yeah. Um, a hope for the future.
Hmm.
And I say that not like everybody's walking around here hopeless, but they do walk around here with a small world, a small confined idea of what their world could look like, or what is accessible for them. So, for example, one of the programs that we run is a performing arts academy.
Okay.
And our performing arts academy, we focus a lot on calling out the strength, the greatness that is in our kids. And we work really hard to introduce them to professionals who can show
Hmm.
them what they can be or who they can be. And giving them and helping open up their world, helping open up the scope of possibility for them. We do the same thing with our tutoring program. We do the same thing with our high school entrepreneurship program. All of our goals are to nurture and equip our scholars. We call them scholars, not students, our scholars, to know that they can do more and that they
Hmm.
can contribute now. We also have a gang violence and intervention program. And so a
Okay.
big part of that is teaching our kids growth mindset, right? That it's okay to fail and it's okay to keep trying, and that you can be a good teammate and a good team member, even if today is the first day that you're going to be that, right? Like there's always another time to start. There's always another chance to do it again.
Right.
um, that a failure doesn't have to be the end of your road.
Hmm.
Regardless of your socioeconomic status, regardless of how many parents you have in the home, regardless of any traumas you might have endured, like there's always something more and there's always a hope that you can walk towards.
Hmm. I just blanked on my next question.
That's okay. It's really exciting work that we do. I love what we do. And so it often renders me speechless too.
um, have you met any kids in your program that remind you of yourself? And how have your interactions been with that particular child?
Yeah. Sadly, because of my role, I don't get a ton of FaceTime with our scholars.
Okay.
I'm pretty removed because I'm pretty neck deep in the business and the fundraising aspect of what we do. But the answer is yes. I have met some of our scholars. One of them in particular, she loves my 4-year-old Justise.
Okay.
Justise is in the winter musical this year, and so she's just like taken to her. Um, and she's just this bubbly girl who's so sweet. She's got a little bit of sass to her, like she's just a no nonsense kid. But she's just kind. She sees people.
Hmm.
um and I'm just reminded when I see her of like who I used to be before like life hardened me, like before life made me cynical and critical and all of that.
Relatable. Yeah.
Right. And so and it's just fun to see how kids are just drawn to her.
Hmm.
And so I just am like, yeah, that's what that like effervescence looks like when
Hmm.
you are unjaded and but have like possibility, right? Of being able to have people trust you enough that they're just attracted to you, that they just want to be around you. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. And so I think those pieces of her just bubbly, kind, she sees people, she sees the kids that like others might overlook. Like if a kid is by themselves, like she's just an includer. Like, yeah, I just thank God for like trauma therapy. I've been in trauma therapy for the last like 8 months. It's changed my
Hmm.
life. I can see young Angela much clearer now. And
Hmm.
so yeah, I see her and I'm like, there she is, you know. So
A
yeah,
mini
it's a great.
leader in the making.
Oh, the best. Yes, truly.
Um,
Yeah.
what is a part of leadership? Speaking of growth mindset, what is a part of
Mhm.
your leadership skills that you would like to get better at?
Oh man. I would like to get better at having harder conversations without like the anxiety and the pressure that comes because of the people pleaser in me.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
I think that part of leadership is saying the hard thing, is like saying the thing that needs to get said so that people can move past their own internal blocks, so that they can grow, so that they can maybe stop making a repeated mistake, so that relationship like woundings can get healed. All of those things are really important in leadership, and as a leader you have to be the courageous one. You have to be the one that goes first. You have to be the one that says the thing.
right.
um, and I'm not often afraid of saying the thing. I just take a little bit longer to say it. So if there's a hard conversation that I know I need to have, it is not my tendency to just have it right away in that moment.
Right.
And I think that one of the things that I can grow in, the reason why I want to grow in it is because if I wait too long and then I have this conversation, that person could be like, "What are you talking about? Like, what?
You're like, it's
What? You're
2026.
you're still thinking about that?" And so, yeah, so that's like one of the things that I know I must get better at that.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm trying.
Awesome. Is
Yeah.
there anything we missed about leadership that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I think oh yes, this is one of the things I want to say. When it comes to like opening yourself up and moving from that lonely place to a place of being known,
Hmm.
the in between those two things is self-awareness. The in between of those two things is like understanding fully who you are, accepting fully who you are,
Mm,
all of the pieces of you. I got better at that when I started therapy, when I started looking at the patterns that I have, looking at the history of my life and how I got shaped and molded into the woman that I am today.
mm,
Like what made me me, what happened to me that like now I'm in this place. And who do I want to be in the future? And how can the pieces of my past and the realities of my present and the hopes for my future help kind of mold me into who I want to be? How can they clarify my image bearing, right? Um, and I think I'm a better friend now because I am just so aware of my own self, right?
mm,
And I also am so much better at telling the truth about myself
mm,
without feeling like I have something to prove, without feeling like, oh, if I say this, are they not gonna like me? Not to say that I don't get insecure sometimes, I don't get anxious. That's the truth. But I can say those things without fear of like losing all of my friends. I can also tell the truth about my strengths and the things that I know I'm good at, because now I'm not saying it from an arrogant place. I'm saying it from a secure place of I know unequivocally that this is who I am, and I want to offer it to you, and you could take it or leave it.
mm,
And if you leave it, that's all right. It doesn't change my worth, it doesn't change my value. And that all came from like deep inner work.
mm,
And so I would encourage any leader who is like hoping to level up or increase your ability or increase your capacity as a leader, go to therapy. Like find an executive coach, find a personal coach, find a therapist,
right.
find someone who can hold up a mirror to you to help you see yourself, so that you can take steps forward in becoming a better version of a stronger version of a more whole version of yourself.
Mm. Th- This reminds me of why I started the podcast. One of the
Mm,
reasons being for people my age. I mean, obviously, I have listeners all different ages, but when you brought up earlier, one thing about leadership is try not to be everything to everyone or all
yep.
things to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that um as I think as a young person, especially with social media, then there's a temptation to mold yourself into, and
Mm-hmm.
at least for me, mold myself into a certain version. And I think what I respect about people older than me, who have done the work like yourself, who have gone to therapy, who have done self-discovery, is they're unashamedly themselves. And I
Mm-hmm.
find that that is one of the biggest struggles of being young, is being okay with who I am, and how I present myself as well. And
Mm,
so, yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think that aligns with one of the goals, I guess, and one of the visions I have for the podcast.
yeah.
Um, I wanted to end by asking for the listeners how they can support Harambe and what
Yeah.
yeah, they can do to get to know the organization better.
Yeah. One of the things obviously is pray for us. The work that we do, it never stops. And we need prayer always. The second thing is you can support financially. I have donors on a monthly basis who give $10, and I have donors who on a monthly basis give $2,000, and every gift in between. And the reason why I say talk about finances is because there is something really special about saying this thing, this money that I treasure, I want to
Mm,
invest it in a place that is investing in kids that I might not know, I might not ever get to meet, but that I know that they're sowing hope and I know that they're doing good work. Also, follow us on social media, subscribe to our emails, because I want to prove to you that what we're doing is good and holy work.
mm.
Um, and then also we're always down for tours. So if people are ever in Pasadena and want to
Okay.
come and walk around, I love giving tours of what we do and who we are and all of that. It is like the joy of my life. So those are like the main ways. So obviously pray, support financially, and then follow us on all the digital platforms.
Right before this recording started, I realized that I had been to um Harambe twice, I think, for
Oh my gosh.
yeah, reunions for foster youth camp.
Yeah, that's right.
And I've actually shot around on the basketball hoop with one of the kids. So
Yeah.
thank you for creating that moment for me because that was a very fond memory for me.
Totally. This place, man, I always just say there's hope in the ground here. Like this is a 41-year-old organization that has just for decades been doing good community development, neighborhood centered work.
Mm.
And so I'm so glad you got to do that. That's so awesome.
Thanks so much for your time and just being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was so great being here. Thank you for having me.